Hey, what's up guys? Steve here, and welcome to today's video where we take a look at the 20 highest selling baseball cards from February of 2023. And we'll kick things off at number 20 with this 1978 Topps Eddie Murray rookie, card number 36. This was a PSA 10 that received 46 bids at the PWCC weekly auction that ended on February 12th and sold for $50,400. This is the second highest sell of this rookie card, only being surpassed by another PSA 10 that sold for just over $59,000 at the peak of the market back in March of 2021. Graded over 12,000 times by PSA, this Hall of Fame rookie card is a pop of only 18 in a PSA 10. We get our first vintage baseball card at number 19 with this 1933 Gaudy Babe Ruth, card number 181. This was a PSA 6.5 that received 30 bids at the same PWCC Premier auction that ended on February 16th and sold for $51,600. This is the new record sell of this card in a PSA 6.5 and also the first 6.5 to hit the open market since November of 2020. The all-time record sell of this card is still held by a PSA 9 that sold for just short of $1.3 million at a memory lane auction back in July of 2021. With over 1,200 copies of this card being graded by PSA, this Babe Ruth is a pop of 6 in a PSA 9 with only one copy graded higher in a PSA 10. I was unable to find any prior sells of that pop of 1 PSA 10. Up next at number 18 is this 1963 Topps Mickey Mantle, card number 200. This was a PSA 9 that received 34 bids at the PWCC Premier auction that ended on February 16th and sold for $55,200. This sale is down as there was 2 PSA 9s sold in 2022, one for 81 grand and another for 90 grand. With this card being graded 6,704 times by PSA, a PSA 9 is a pop of 40, with only 2 copies graded higher in a PSA 10. Like the previous card, I was unable to find any prior comps for a PSA 10. We get another vintage card at number 17 with this 1948 Bowman Stan Musial, card number 36. This was a PSA 9 that received 14 bids at the Heritage auction that ended on February 26th and sold for $56,400. This sale is down, but not by much, as there was 5 PSA 9s sold in 2022 with an average sell price of around 61 grand. The all-time record sell of this card is still held by a PSA 10 that sold for $360,000 at a memory lane auction back in May of 2017. With just over 2,000 copies being graded by PSA, this card is a pop of 15 in a PSA 9, with only one copy graded higher in a PSA 10. We get our first modern card at number 16, with this 2018 Bowman Chrome Rookie Autograph Shohei Ohtani. This was a BGS 9.5 that received 33 bids at the PWCC Premier auction on February 16th and sold for $57,600. This sale is down as a BGS 9.5 of this orange refractor sold for 84 grand in May of 2022, and the record sell of this BGS 9.5 is still set at $148,830 from back in July of 2021. An interesting note while doing research for this card, the last PSA 10 sold for $10,626 back in September of 2020, and a PSA 10 has not hit the open market since. Up next at number 15 is this 1909 T206 Ty Cobb, card number 98. This was a PSA 7 that received 31 bids at the Heritage auction that ended on February 26th and sold for $60,000. This is the second highest sell of this card in a PSA 7, as the record was set in December of 2022 for just over 73K. The all-time record sale of this card is still held by a PSA 8 that sold for $210,000 at a heritage auction back in November of 2021. We're sticking to vintage at number 14 with this 1948 Leaf Bob Feller, card number 93. This was a PSA 8 that received 9 bids at the heritage auction that ended on February 26th and sold for $63,000. This is the second highest ever sell of this card, falling only $9,000 short of the all-time record sale that was set by a PSA 8 that sold at an REA auction back in April of 2021. A PSA 8 is a pop of only 6 with none graded higher. We get a classic 90s insert at number 13 with this 1998 Metal Universe Ken Griffey Jr. Precious Metal Gems, card number 161. This was a BGS 9 that received 28 bids at the PWCC Premier Auction that ended on February 16th and sold for $66,000. Serial numbered out of only 50, this Ken Griffey Jr. PMG sets the new all-time record sale in any grade by any grading company by default, as this is the first ever graded sale I could find. We get another modern baseball card at number 12 with this 2017 Bowman Chrome Prospects autographed Ronald Acuna Jr. This was a BGS 9.5 that received 37 bids at the PWCC Premier Auction on February 16th and sold for $93,000. This card continues to go down, as a BGS 9.5 sold for $108K in July of last year, and a BGS 9.5 sold for $236,160 at a Golden auction back in September of 2020. The all-time record sale of this card is still held by a BGS gold-labeled Pristine 10 that sold for $370,230 at a Golden auction back in March of 2021. Coming in at number 11 is this 1915 Crackerjack Christy Mathewson, card number 88. This was a PSA 8 that received 27 bids at the heritage auction that ended on February 26th and sold for $93,000. Despite multiple prior PSA 9 sales, this is the new record sale of this card in any grade by any grading company. The last PSA 9 to hit the open market sold for $78K at a heritage auction back in May of 2019. Kicking off the top 10 of today's list is this 1912 Plows Candy Ty Cobb. This was a PSA 6 that received 16 bids at the heritage auction on February 26th and also sold for $93,000. This is the new record sale of this card in a PSA 6 and the first to hit an online auction house since 2006. The all-time record sale of this card is still held by a PSA 7 that sold for $222,000 at a heritage auction back in February of 2022. Coming in at number 9 is this 1941 Play Ball Joe DiMaggio, card number 71. This was a PSA 8 that received 11 bids at the heritage auction that ended on February 26th and also sold for $93,000. This is the new record sale of this card in a PSA 8, surpassing the previous record by 18 grand. The all-time record sale of this card is still held by a PSA 10 that sold for $750,000 at a heritage auction back in February of 2020. Up next at number 8 is this 1910 Set of 30 Ty Cobb. This was a PSA 10 that received 8 bids at the heritage auction that ended on February 26th and sold for $120,000. This is the second highest sell of this card in any grade by any grading company, but far off from the record PSA 10 that sold for $288,000 back in April of last year. Coming in at number 7 is this 1909 White Borders Ty Cobb, card number 98. This was a PSA 2.5 that received 11 bids at the Heritage Auction on February 26th and sold for $144,000. Someone took a big loss on this card, as this exact PSA 2.5 first hit the open market in November of last year and sold for $222,000. Coming in at number 6 is this 1911 Sporting Life Ty Cobb, card number 55. This was a PSA 8 that received 17 bids at a Heritage Auction that ended on February 26th and sold for $174,000. This is undoubtedly the new record sell of this card in any grade by any grading company, and also the highest graded copy to ever hit the open market. The previous record was held by a PSA 6 that sold for $17,542 at a Memory Lane auction back in July of 2021. While this card is a pop of 2 in a PSA 8, there is one copy graded higher in a PSA 9 that I was unable to find any prior sales of. Kicking off the top 5 of today's list is this 1952 Topps Willie Mays, card number 261. This was a PSA 8 that received 13 bids at the Heritage Auction that ended on February 26th and sold for $186,000. This sell is down as PSA 8s have been averaging closer to $215K. The all-time record sell of this card is still held by a PSA 9 that sold for $478,000 at a Heritage Auction back in May of 2016. Up next at number 4 is this 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, card number 311. This was a SGC 6 that received 24 bids at the Heritage Auction that ended on February 26th and sold for $210,000. This is the new record sell of this card in a SGC 6, while the all-time record sell of this card is still held by a SGC 9.5 that sold for $12.6 million at a Heritage Auction back in August of last year. Willie Mays makes another appearance at number 3, this time with his 1953 Topps, card number 244. This was a SGC 9 that received 6 bids at the Heritage Auction that ended on February 26th and sold for $360,000. This is undoubtedly the new record sell of this card in any grade by any grading company, and also the second sell I could find to break the 6-figure mark as well. The previous record was just set back in September of last year, where a PSA 8 sold for $194,579 at a Memory Lane auction. Coming in at number 2 is this 1951 Bowman Mickey Mantle, card number 253. This was a PSA 8 that received 16 bids at the same Heritage Auction that ended on February 26th and sold for $480,000. This is a pretty strong sell, as there were 7 PSA 8s of this card sold in 2022, with only one of those surpassing the $480K mark. The all-time record sell of this card is still held by a PSA 9 that sold for just short of $3.2 million at a Memory Lane auction only a few months prior in December of 2022. And topping off today's list for the 20 highest selling baseball cards from February of 2023 is this 1916 Sporting News Babe Ruth, card number 151. This was a SGC 7 that received 18 bids at the Heritage Auction that ended on February 26th and sold for just short of $1.8 million. This is the first comp I could find for an SGC 7, and also the new record sale of this card in any SGC slab. The all-time record sale of this card is still held by a PSA 7 that sold for $2.4 million at a Mile High auction back in November of 2021. Thanks for joining me today, guys, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace.